Welcome to Decentralized News, a recap of the biggest news affecting the crypto economy. I am your host, Piter, in the United States, joined by my Canadian friend, Aussie. Did you see the big game
Oh yeah,
recently
I watched
between
the whole
our
thing.
our hockey game between our respective countries?
Yeah, it was a game, all right. That's for sure.
Who was more disrespectful, the Canadians or the United for booing the national anthem, or the United States for picking three
Bothering to
fights
show
and then
up.
smashing them 3-1 in the game? Although you put me in check about that a little bit. It's a
Yeah,
closer
it
game
it was a much
than
closer game
the
than
U.S.
this.
reports.
Yeah, definitely much closer game than the U.S. reports. And oh, the three fights were that was something. That was something else. The Kachuk boys
Fights in the
causing
first
trouble.
9 seconds. That was the headline.
Yep. Oh yeah, it was wild.
Just the puck drops, gloves drop.
Oh
30.
yeah,
There was that happened twice, and then there was a brief bit of play and then another fight.
yeah. More. It was very much just puck draw gloves off. It was
Yeah,
quite the scene. My brothers and I were all watching and we're like, what's going on?
yeah, this is wild. There's not gonna be any players left on the ice.
Yeah, that's it. Bench clearing brawl, maybe. But
All right, well, let's get into the crypto economy. That's what we're here for. It's a struggle to do it, and in our struggle to keep up with this space, we're going to cover stories today about institutional adoption, potential catalysts for this bull run, the FTX repayments, meme coins, the big story in there, macro, and a speed run through the altcoin universe. We'll start with this adoption story. State Street and Citibank to get into crypto custody business. This was a bit of a big story earlier in the week, although it's more about long-term development. When I looked into it, State Street, one of the world's largest custodian banks, is expected to launch its crypto custody services next year. And then Citi, the third largest U.S. bank, is also exploring crypto custody services. So there was big headlines about it, but it's nothing that seems imminent. But it does highlight institutional interest in the asset class in general with
yeah,
this adoption.
it has to do like it shows that the law, but the about crypto being like a negative balance on your balance sheet potentially did have an impact because this was these weren't conversations that or announcements that we were having before, and now we've got two of the largest banks in the US talking about it. So it could be like we could be seeing an effect of that relief, but who knows? And yeah, it's more of a long term adoption thing, not as much of a short term. This is going to be very bullish news right now.
Yeah, there really is an interesting paradox in this space right now with this institutional and ETF investment, MicroStrategy investment, by big corporations, pension funds, government sovereign wealth funds, which we'll get into. But then the other side, you have when is there going to be a run with altcoins? There's talk about utility coins versus meme coins, and our meme coins just absolutely ruining everything for this bull run.
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about MicroStrategy and Bitcoin ETFs. The other kind of the story out of Canada really is I guess there was a whole bunch of filings that had to be done in BMO, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
one of the largest banks in Canada. I don't know if they're the largest, but they are one of the largest, especially in retail
banged
space.
up.
They're one of the bigger nationwide banks. We got about five kind of like nationwide banks that operate, and they happen to be my bank, which is interesting. They announced that they bought more Bitcoin ETF. They now hold over 150 million Canadian dollars, give or take about 100 million US dollars worth of Bitcoin ETF. And then the other announcement was that the a whole bunch of banks are holding MicroStrategy as a means of getting Bitcoin exposure. So the strategy of using MicroStrategy continues to be something that we see.
Yeah, it's
Canada's
strategy now, right? It's like strategy to the power of Bitcoin is their new logo. They released that whole new thing. It's not even MicroStrategy anymore.
yes, it's just strategy.
Like it's just strategy. Yeah, strategy. Yeah, like to the power of Bitcoin up there. But leads us right into this story, which was, I think, a much bigger story and connected to what we're talking about. The sovereign fund of Abu Dhabi acquired 400 million in spot Bitcoin ETFs in the fourth quarter of 2024. All these filings that are coming out required for these larger institutional investors. So the Muda investment company, which manages assets on behalf of the government of Abu Dhabi, made the purchase last quarter. The move signals interest in Bitcoin as an investment class, but also a diversification strategy with sovereign funds portfolios. So that's pretty big news. And it actually made me wonder about the US sovereign wealth fund and if that isn't a hedge against like slow progress with a Bitcoin reserve.
Oh, I wonder if that's how they're going to get the Bitcoin reserve, is realistically, because if you set up the sovereign wealth fund, you instruct it to hold Bitcoin, or it determines Bitcoin is a strong strategy based on who you put in place, then it makes it pretty hard to get rid of it. Like, it's hard to remove the sovereign wealth fund and undo the Bitcoin reserve from there. It I'm sure there probably would be ways, but it probably is more protected that way, legally speaking, from a term change and a precedent change than just announcing a Bitcoin reserve. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
It seems like a more agile way to get to it. That's why the hedge against the idea in my head about the hedge against waiting for legislation to move forward that allows it from Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is agile, and I think it follows like probably good practice too, which is surprising a little bit from Trump because he tends to avoid the bureaucratic means of doing things, but and like the he just does it. He does it however he wants to do it. But what this shows to me is maybe he is trying to approach this properly, because maybe he does really believe in Bitcoin and he wants to see that happen. But
I hope so. I don't know if he truly understands the difference between and just the rest of the market. Where he's involved seems to be the rest of the market. I mean,
I
especially with
mean,
that meme coin that they dropped right before, and the
yeah,
NFT World Liberty Finance seems to be really involved with Ethereum and other Ondo and other altcoins.
it does hold Bitcoin. It does hold Bitcoin, and he does have the Ordinals project, which it's
Yeah.
NFT. It's still degen space, but you're right. He's not necessarily as in tune with Bitcoin as he is maybe the more degen side of the market. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if maxis are too excited, but yeah. So it brings up in terms of the US sovereign wealth fund hedging or as a way to get there faster than a strategic reserve. We might see it from the states earlier, and we've seen just the number of states grow. There are different reports, and the bills are all a little different, so it's hard to really get specific about it. But there's reports of 24 to 29 different states with some type of strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. And while there's a lot of excitement, and this is a fun headline, um, it may lead to a lot of difficult stories that the market has to overcome, because we have reports out North Dakota and Wyoming killing the bills, one in committee, one in chamber, in the chamber vote. It just highlights there are many obstacles of these things becoming law. They go through a House committee, got to pass that. House vote, got to pass that. Senate committee, got to pass that. Senate vote, got to pass that. I think there's all the time, or sometimes both sides vote, and then you have a potential gubernatorial veto. It's got to get passed. So there's just a lot to overcome, and there may be more negative stories about bills getting killed than positive ones before one ever breaks through, if and when one breaks through.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of states, and there's probably a lot of like House representatives that are like, oh, we've seen that Bitcoin like makes a difference in the election, and so they want to put that. Oh, I put down the state Bitcoin reserve like trill bill. I attempted to do it as something
Right.
for re-election but maybe they don't do any campaigning on it. Like they don't try to actually get it through, and so it'll be interesting to see how many of these are
Or
token presentations.
just to build off that, it could be younger or less experienced members that have less knowledge about
Sway.
how to get a bill passed. Yeah,
Yeah.
sway, XP in terms of getting it done. But just the sheer number. even one getting through would be exciting at this point.
It'd be very exciting. I feel like
It could start a domino effect if one can just get through. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. I think Texas or Pennsylvania are probably your best bets for seeing something through first. I know that there's a pretty strong lobby in Texas because Texas is not only home to a lot of
Mining,
Bitcoin mining, but they've got a
right.
pretty active blockchain council there, and there's a bunch of tech within and crypto tech within Austin, Texas, that and so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw at least some lobby for that, and maybe being more palatable in Texas compared to some of the other states.
I think they have I saw a tweet this morning, something about a committee meeting happening imminently. Moving forward, we'll see how it goes, but continuing on with the hurdles. Another potential catalyst for this bull run, there's been a lot of talk about the FTX repayments. So dig into the details a little bit of that. It starts on February 18th, which is Tuesday of this week. However, the repayments are going to start at first for people that are owed 50,000 or less, and they do have to jump through some hurdles to get that money. And if they don't, there's a deadline. They can still receive the money later, apparently. But we're talking about, there's been a lot of headlines about 17 billion, but this first repayment involves as much as 7 billion. Then the creditors over 50,000, it won't start till next quarter. But anyway, it's still exciting that it's happening, but it may not, it's not just 17 billion hitting the market tomorrow or whatever. It's going to take 1 to 3 days. And it's going to start with, like I said, this smaller amounts, although it's still significant. We're talking about $7 million potentially, or maximum.
Yeah, and it's not exactly going to be like an avalanche. It'll probably be like a trickle of seeing that 7 billion hit the market, because if I remember correctly, I think they've got 30, is it 30 or 90 days to really file and go through the process. So I
Yeah.
think there's some people that will maybe do it quickly. Like there's maybe like those eager beavers that have stayed in the market that are like, oh, and maybe they've got like 45 or $35,000 worth of additional liquidity. They're like, oh, I can go buy some of my alts or go buy some Bitcoin on this dip, who might definitely rush to do it. But I don't think that'll be everybody. I think there's a lot of people that are still very tuned out of this market, and it might be a bit more of a trickle for some of those. Maybe we see a glut and then a trickle.
Yeah. Yeah. The other catalyst that I hear people talking about is tax season coming to a close in the United States. So any kind of refund or just the fact that you've dealt with your taxes may emotionally free you up for more purchases.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
When is
I
taxes in Canada?
it's starting. Like, I should be getting all of my paperwork to file my taxes in the next week or two, most likely.
When is the due date for
Um,
Canada?
I think we got to file by end of March. If I'm so we
Oh, so
file.
it's even earlier than the US. It's April for the US. But people, yeah, they get all their paperwork so they can start to close the books and see where they're at.
Yeah, I think usually it's like you get your paperwork February, and then I
Yeah, like
think
at the end of February, mid-February.
yeah, and then we file. I think maybe it's April 1st is like the filing deadline. I always try to file a week ahead of time. I
Yeah,
always just say the end of March,
right,
but
right. I know it
yeah,
feels like the pressure. I feel like the heat's there, so I gotta get on my business.
yeah. That oh, absolutely. My girlfriend and I were just looking at our taxes, like looking at getting her tax forms together, and I'm waiting on mine from work, but starting to get mine together too.
The It's not all good news though. We had this. The meme coins is the other side of the spectrum. It seems like with this whole market. What are your views in general? Are you positive, negative for the space? There's a lot of if you're invested and been holding these altcoins for a while, you're a Bitcoin max, you're ugh. But then it's free market, and that's what people want to do with it. Want to trade
So
meme coins.
when they started, like when they really originally started back in like the bear market of 2022, like starting in like 2022, I really wasn't a fan of them. I didn't get them because no utility. I then, as they started taking off again in 2023, heading into 20 and 2024, I started seeing, okay, I can get this a little bit because there was a bit of me.
Arguably, it's where the action is, right? If you're here every day in the space.
Yeah. And the thing was that it wasn't like it is now where something you buy at 100K, you don't want to sit on it for more than 3, 4, 5 hours, maybe a few days, like a week tops, but usually less than a day. It was like, oh, okay, you bought, there's, as long as you can figure out which of these 10 ones is going to do it, you can probably hold this for a couple of months or a month at the very least.
Yeah,
And
it seems like the life cycle is shrinking while as fast as the number of coins is going up,
the
like
life
this life
cycle's
cycle.
shrinking massively, and that's where I've started to see a little bit of the negativity, and started feeling some negativity again, because it's like it's not like this meme coin is going to last past the day, at least for the most part. And if it does, it's one that randomly shot up to 1 billion or 2 billion market cap, or like multiple 100 million market cap, that no one, unless you were an insider, got good entry on, kind of thing. And the longevity has turned me off a little bit because it's made people very quick to take profits, and there's no longevity to it. There's no persistence to it. It's just, can you get enough calls lined up so you can get this to a certain market cap as quick as you can and then get out.
Yeah. Maybe we've started to reach a peak of whatever this is that's going on. I don't know. I won't believe it till it's gone. I don't know. They've been around a while. Oh yeah, the Trump one, Melania, those were big. And then there's this whole Libra thing that came up. So there's some pretty big black eyes, and it highlights all the things you're talking about, like who is actually making money and benefiting, and is it fair? And yeah, just is it good for the space? So I this Libra story is hard to follow. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's all happening pretty fast. But the meme coin and crypto world, the Argentinian president Javier Milei publicly endorsed the project that is now being called $100 million rug pull. It launched and soared to 4 billion plus market cap, and then 8 insider wallets cashed out for 107 million, wiping out 94% of the market cap, 4 billion market cap, in just 3 hours after launch. So it all happened really fast. Highlights the life cycle type of thing. And what is left is just a giant mess. Malay deleted the original post. He's saying he's launching an anti-corruption investigation, including himself, but he's also facing impeachment calls, pretty serious impeachment calls. Seems like there's a chance, legal action, but it only seems to be undermining like the progress he
Was trying to
is
make
making.
in
Yeah,
Argentina.
just like the momentum, because he was really trying to make major changes. He
Yeah,
wanted,
major economic reform, where Argentina had the worst inflation in the world, I believe, at the time.
he's making huge changes that are going to piss off some people, obviously. So it's hard to keep that momentum when you're ruffling that many feathers. And then to do something like this, that's not going to help his political career,
No,
and his ability to get anything done.
it's
And then
definitely not great. Not and definitely puts a stick in any kind of wheels or any kind of momentum that he was trying to get on
right, so
most of
you
his
have
economic
the
policy.
issue of the celebrities that are involved, and is this good or bad for them? And look what happened to Haktua, and then Melania is dumped. The same guy, I'm not 100% sure on this, but that was involved with Libra. We'll talk about him a little bit. Hunter Hayden, that was involved with Melania. So now she's associated with it potentially. The Trump and Melania both have dropped a lot. And then there's Tua, wasn't that long before that. And that was just a big mess. She was barely getting her career off the ground. And then on the other, there's also the Coles, like you mentioned, the influencers, and then there's the exchanges. Also in this Libra mess, Jupiter Exchange, members of the decentralized exchange were aware of the tokens, were reportedly aware of the tokens' imminent launch weeks before it hit the market, but they didn't do anything. They didn't say anything publicly, and the exchange wasn't compensated in Libra tokens, so nothing to see here. But it just begs the question: who knows what? Who's actually winning in these things? And could potentially anyone at the exchange been involved? It seems like maybe legally they're in the clear, but still,
Yeah,
because if
ones
you're an
would have to do
investor,
some sleuthing on their personal wallets, and just see if there's any connections. It's possible. There's a lot of good tools out there, but where there are good tools, there are also people who can figure out ways to hide from those tools. It'll be interesting to see what those possible repercussions are. I
Does it
think to
hurt the
me,
exchange's reputation, coins in general, and Solana, that kind of thing? But there's also the influencer side. I don't know. You follow Dave Portnoy?
I know of him and I follow a little bit of his
So
stuff.
he's
I've
like
definitely
famous
heard.
pizza reviews and sports. He's a Boston guy. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Barstool Sports.
yeah, Barca Sports, loud, noxious guy, whatever. But he was pushing this other meme coin that he just bought it on his own. So he's been involved with meme coins recently, and then he's involved in this Libra thing now. So we had the Hunter Hayden guy on stream talking about it, but his story is he was in fact paid 6 million Libra tokens, but returned it because they told him he couldn't disclose it and he wasn't comfortable with that. And he invested 5 million on his own, and then it got dumped on. And so he's got the guy on stream, and the guy pays him back 5 million. This Hunter Hayden guy, 5 million USDC. He says it wasn't from the project; it was his own money or whatever. I don't know. I think, like you said, like blockchain sleuths are questioning that, but just it's just an influencer. He's able to get paid back. You know what I mean? Just the look of that, right? Like
Yeah,
someone who's closer, like the Cantillon effect, someone who's closer to the money printer, they can get paid back, but the retail is screwed. But anyway, so that happened. And then the same guy, this Hunter Hayden guy, who was it Kaiser Ventures, it's his group or his VC that launched his coin. So CoffeeZilla did an interview with him, and he claimed it wasn't insiders, but sniping bots. But he also says the team had their own sniping bots to snipe, but it was to protect the project and protect liquidity. Anyway, I mean, he also claims that he is in custody of $100 million in funds. So now the big question is what happens with that? What to do with that, right? Do you donate it? Do you refund it, which is a long, complicated process? Do you re-inject that as liquidity? And then who knows what hanky panky goes on there? Just keep it, every man for himself, and do nothing wrong. I
yeah.
It's wild. Like all of it's just pretty wild. And to me, it just shines a spotlight on how hard it is for retail investors and what a disadvantage they are to the launch teams, snipers, influencers, Coles. And then like for these celebrities, just like the brand damage it can do to
Oh,
them. You know
oh,
what I mean? Their political
absolutely.
power or their celebrity. Yeah. Look at Malay and the Hawk Tuah girl, the other one. Trump, I don't know. He's like Teflon Don, like nothing sticks to him.
Yeah,
I won't believe it hurts him till it actually does. I'm not saying I'm a maxi because I'm involved with the space, but I like prefer Bitcoin preferred. It's like disappointing to watch Trump in that way, but just this whole story like puts in the spotlight a lot of the issues.
Oh, I definitely agree. I feel like this is you had like when Trump did it, that was like to me that was a bit of a top signal. Okay, like the president of the U.S. launched a meme coin, or the about to be president of the U.S. launched a meme coin. So that was definitely a bit of a okay. Has the
Oh,
meme
there was
cycle
that. There's a in Africa too. There was a country where a guy
Central African Republic, I believe.
something like that. So it wasn't as big of a country as Argentina, but where it went wrong, it's just I don't know, a rug pull or just like unfair. I don't know. Rug pull is such a
For a sniper to be able to pull that, like to hit that early and pull that much liquidity, they have to have at least one person, someone that was running that sniping bot had to be an insider, because the reality is that sniping bots, a project as you run sniping bots to protect their own liquidity. Like that does happen. So that
protect their
statement
own
in and of
team
itself
space.
isn't total BS, but
Right.
also most sniping bots don't hold for that long. Wouldn't hold long enough to reach 100 million, like $100 million worth of funds. They're usually set up for much quicker takes on profits. So someone would have had to customize their sniping bot because they had inside info knowing that this particular launch was going to be huge.
It's just, is there going to be an alt season and just whole debate versus utility versus meme coins? Are meme coins just ruining it because every new participant that comes in the space, if they go towards meme coins and they get ruined, does that just create more just straight Bitcoin maxis? You know? Like that whole
Um,
idea.
I would say yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna buy the ETF now. Forget this.
I would think that I think it's going to be a
Trade up
double-edged
ETF.
sword. I do think we still have an alt season because I think that the same knock-on effect of Bitcoin's too expensive, I want I can get bigger gains elsewhere in altcoins, ETH, Sol, etc. is going to still happen, but
So maybe it's okay. Bitcoin is gonna run first. You know what I mean? Like from here, still, for there to be any kind of alt season, Bitcoin's
Bitcoin
got to
needs
run.
to keep running.
Meme coin's gonna help feed that because people are just gonna either totally be turned away or they'll go towards Bitcoin, and that will fuel the next potential alt season, which still could come in this bull run. But more utility coins.
I would think so.
That's the narrative.
My thought process is that realistically, you're gonna Bitcoin dominance is already it's at 60%. It's come down. It was at 62 or 63% last week. It's come down a little bit. I think that we do start seeing some alts start performing well soon. ETH's doing pretty well today. It's up about 4%. There was a few I don't want to jinx it, but I do think that we start seeing some movement soon for certain alts. But I do think that we do see a whole bunch of people say, okay, Sol meme coins, I've had enough, and start moving more major parts of their portfolio into Bitcoin. Then maybe we start seeing we also see some of that trickle into utility or other coins, maybe like Jupiter. Jupiter's is going to be talked about in the speed run section briefly, and that could be somewhere where people who are very familiar with Sol would be familiar with Jupiter might shift some of their capital, their meme capital there.
Actually, you bring up like an interesting narrative or concept. It's like, oh, maybe the utility coins on Sol will benefit because people are there already. Kind of an idea.
Yeah, I think that there will definitely be some knock-on effect. I know that Radium did their Ray token at one point did fairly well because just the reports on Radium revenue were like incredibly high. But I do think that we could maybe it starts with some Sol-based tokens or something like that and fills the rest of the market.
Interesting idea. The other thing affecting when alt season is macro rate cuts, end of quantitative tightening. So CPI unemployment came in, leaving us with a 97% chance that rates stay the same, as we don't see any move in March. You know the numbers a little bit, but there was also Jerome Powell spoke in front of Congress, and we have this quote: "We would only use quantitative easing when rates are at zero, and considering the pace that it's going towards zero, that would be never." So the question I have is just an end to tightening, not necessarily that we start easing. Is that bullish enough for crypto and
I
for
think it
altcoins?
could be because you don't necessarily need things to go like interest rates to go completely to zero for that to ease up on people's bank accounts. You know, that line of credit or whatever might start getting more attractive or more payable with interest rates down 1 or 2%, or being able to refinance your mortgage at 2% or 3% rather than at the 6 or 7 that it is probably right now in most of the states. And so that could provide the liquidity that people need and that kind of financial stability that people need to be able to put money into crypto. That being said, we're still battling inflation. At least in the States, that's what it seems to be like. The CPI last week was...
There's not a lot of incentive to lower rates based on the CPI, for sure.
Yeah. CPI came in at 0.5 month over month and at 3% year over year, which were both 0.2% above forecast. So 0.3 was the forecast. We came in at 0.5, and year over year came in at 3% with an expectation of 2.8, and both upticking from last month's numbers, and even the same thing on core. So really nothing great, and unemployment on top of that came down. So you're just not seeing any incentives to lower rates. So it'll
Yeah, the
be
only
interesting
somewhat
to
good news
continue.
on unemployment is job growth did seem to slow. And that seemed to be in the numbers. But yeah, the overall rate doesn't seem like enough to push the Fed to do anything hasty.
Exactly. So there's just nothing really. There's no major incentives to get to that point yet, and so we'll have to watch and see, and maybe this is the cycle where we don't see it as much because other factors like institutional adoption, more wider accessibility of crypto makes it so that you don't need all of those conditions to fully trigger an alt season.
Or maybe it just becomes a Bitcoin centric cycle and alt's gotta wait. They gotta wait another cycle. And maybe the cycles become harder to distinguish as the
That's definitely
inflation
a
rate.
possibility.
Maybe the new regime in the United States, just because government moves slow, maybe that has an effect on the cycle, can't keep up with it basically, and it has less of an influence anyway. And we start to see those lines really blur this cycle.
I think that's definitely a major possibility is that we start seeing lines blur because some of these institutions, I won't say all institutions, but I do think some of these institutions are really here for the short term peak in interest. Some institutions are here for the long term or are looking to hold for the long term. And so that does mean that they might not take profits for the 2x or the 3x that Bitcoin runs. They might be willing to ride the ups and the downs a lot more. And with the fact that there's not nearly as much Bitcoin entering circulation every day or overall, that could just factor in less smaller swings. I think there's less than 10% of Bitcoin left to be mined, and 90%'s out there. And if a lot of it ends up in hodl hands, diamond hands, then there's a lot less room for things to swing up and down.
There's still a huge percentage in individuals' hands compared to institutions, I believe.
Yeah, I believe institutions are still below 5 or 10%, something like that, but of the total supply. But there's there is starting to be not a non-negligible number that's being held institutionally.
Yeah, I think the individuals is in the 70%. So like they would have to sell. It'd be interesting to see how this plays out, what
Exactly.
percentage. But let's jump into the alt universe in the hopes that it comes around. One of the big ones, February 23rd this month, we'll start ETH Denver. Maybe a little juice in there.
Maybe some excitement, maybe some announcements. There are these ETH Denver and stuff like that are always fun conferences to be at in a bull run, a bull market. I It'll be
I don't know if
interesting.
Alex supposed to be there. Maybe we'll get some new memes.
Oh, always, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what the mood is at this one, since ETH hasn't moved as much as people expected. If the energy is at that kind of bull run high, or if that's waiting for next year kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Jupiter, they are starting a buyback. So I think they're using their profits from the exchange.
Yeah,
I think they're like 50% of their profits, something like that, like pretty big number
I
to
believe it is 50%. That 50% of revenue earned is going to be going to buybacks on the Jupiter token.
be a little more exciting if they did it earlier in the meme coin cycle. If it's coming to an end and now they're gonna start sharing, oh, you crafty guys.
Yeah, if we think that the cycle is still going to keep going for the next 9 months or so, there's still tons of
Um,
money for Jupiter to make, whether it's buying utility tokens on Sol or we continue to see memes.
all right, we had Virtual's protocol. They launched on Solana, keeping with the Solana theme. They've pretty much been down. That thing really pumped up hard. Don't think that my bold prediction is going to be coming true. It doesn't look like it anyway so far.
It'll be interesting. Ondo Finance has announced Ondo Chain, which is going to be an L1 built for institutional grade RWAs. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Ondo is definitely a token that I've been watching. in the RWA space, they seem to be the leaders. The fact that they're going for their own L1 is interesting to me, but
Maybe provides security for real world assets, control, like centralized control. I don't know.
yeah,
I have,
maybe there's some KYC elements or not KYC, but like verification elements before releasing an RWA product on the chain or something like that, being able to truly
it gives them
verify the
control.
assets.
All right, another final announcement. Mantle announced its Season 2 Metamorphosis Points program that ended on February 16th. On top of this, Funny Money, a new AI agent platform on Mantle, released its referral program. AI agents still in the news, although the excitement seems to have dwindled a little bit on those.
Yeah, they definitely, that meta did not have necessarily a full chance to blossom with the Trump inauguration and his meme coin, and then everything that's precipitated the more or less month of chop and down that we've seen has definitely made that narrative struggle a bit more than other narratives have so far.
Thanks for watching the show. Please do your own research. We are not financial advisors. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Thanks very much for joining us this week, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next week.